All right, if you've been in the market for an EV or been researching it at all, or maybe you're an EV owner who just got one and you bought it in the warm months and you're worried about how the cold can affect your range, we're going to find out today kind of what impact that really does have on your overall range. Now, I'm going to be using my Volvo C40. This is a 2023. It is not a range beast by default because it only has about 220 miles of range. But that doesn't matter because what I'm going to do is take it on just a little over a 100-mile route, about 104 miles, I believe, up to my parents' house. This is a route that I frequently drive, and I'm going to do it today when it's fairly cold out. I would say fairly because it's about 5 degrees Fahrenheit right now. So it's, at least for Southern Ohio, this is brutal cold. So for Southern Ohio, for me, this is about as bad as it's going to get. And then we're going to run this route when it's warmer using the same car, the same route, going the same speed with the same starting state of charge, and find out how much range we have left when we get to our destination then, and just kind of get a comparison of what those differences really are. So to keep this fair, I'm not using any heated steering or heated seat setting right now. I've got everything turned off, and I'm using a climate control setting of 66 degrees Fahrenheit. And I'm going to try to drive it exactly the same way, so we have as much of an apples to apples comparison as we can possibly get. The current temperature is warmed up to a balmy 16 degrees Fahrenheit. Now, we do have pretty nice dry driving conditions, so we're not having an impact of like snowy roads creating more rolling resistance in the tires. Nothing like that. But one thing that's probably worth pointing out is that this car does not have a heat pump. So it just uses standard electric heat. And so it will impact having to maintain a particular climate temperature in the cabin is going to have a little bit more of an impact on this car than it would a car that has a heat pump design. So keep that in mind. I don't know exactly how much difference a heat pump would make. I might try to do a little bit of research, and if I can find a decent answer to that, I'll put that down here for you. But so yeah, standard electric heat. So this really is kind of the the worst case scenario. We are keeping a pretty steady, approximately 70 miles an hour while we're on the main drag here on the highway. And if you can look down in the sort of lower left-hand corner of the display there, you can see total miles so far, 66.8 miles. But that number right below it is kind of the important one. It's the one that tells us how efficient our car is on this trip. And you can see we are at 41.2 kilowatt hours per 100 miles. Well, clearly somebody is in need of a serious pick-me-up this morning. We got 2 Red Bull Mini Coopers in front of me. I don't see that every day. All right, we have arrived. You can see down here 100.5 miles, and our efficiency number was 39.5 kilowatt hours per 100 miles. And if we kind of check up there a little bit, you can see we are at a still quite balmy 13 degrees Fahrenheit, and we are at 44% state of charge. All right, so probably going to be a few days, maybe even a couple of weeks before I get warm enough temperatures to finally redo this test and see what kind of numbers we get with warmer weather. But yeah, stay tuned. We'll see how it works out. All right, we are on test number 2. I'm going to make the same route, set the cabin temperature to 66 degrees Fahrenheit, no heated seats, no heated steering wheel, nothing. Going to try to maintain the same approximate speed at that same distance, same route, whole 9 yards. Now today we're starting anyway right now at about an ambient temperature of 35 degrees Fahrenheit. It's not going to change much between here and my destination 100 miles away. So this is about 25 degrees warmer than we were on the last test. And I'm going to try to rerun this in a little bit more moderate temps, well above 50, and then we're going to do it when it's hot out. So this video is going to take me a while, but we should get then a sense of kind of like the 4 seasons of impact on your range. So let's get on the road and we'll see how it goes. All right, I'm going to talk less on this test than I did on the last one because I think you get the idea of what I'm doing here. But just to give you a few more data points here, it is pretty overcast, as you can see. We are sitting still at 35 degrees Fahrenheit. So we'll check back in once we get up to the destination. Should have pretty much everything as exact as I can make it. I'm sure there will be some variance in driving speeds, but I don't think it'll be significant. and we'll get a sense of what the differences really are. See you in a bit. All right, we have arrived. Let's take a look at the stats. Down here you can see we are at 100.2 miles, which is kind of interesting because I drove exactly the same route, and last time it was a 100.5 miles. So somehow we shortened the trip by 0.3 of a mile. But if you look at the efficiency number below that, we're at 37.4. That's just 2.1 kilowatt hours per 100 miles better than we did when the temperature was about, call it 20 degrees or 21 degrees colder. So you can see up there at the top there, we're at 33 degrees. So we actually dropped a couple of degrees. And then look at the remaining range here. We have 47% state of charge. And we got here last time when it was literally 12 degrees outside when we arrived, and we were at 44% state of charge. All right, so we'll redo this test when it warms up a little bit more, and we'll get a sense for what this does in much more modest temperatures. All right, we're up for trip number 3, and today temperatures are currently sitting at 66 degrees Fahrenheit. So pretty mild day, and that's basically where I've got the climate control again, got the seat heaters off, and much more mild climate day. So we'll see what this would probably be our best case scenario. So let's find out how we do. So I'll check back with you when we get to the destination and we'll look at the numbers. All right, now this isn't going to be a totally dry trip. We're expecting some storms moving in. It's pretty early in the morning still, and I've already gotten a little bit of rain. We'll see how much wind and rain we actually get, but again, hoping that this doesn't have any significant impact on our actual data. All right, we have just arrived, and the weather was relatively cooperative. We had about, I want to say 50% of the journey in some form of rain. But yeah, look up here, you can see in the top, current temperature outside is 60 degrees Fahrenheit, and we did 101.4 miles, so our actual distance traveled here was right in line with what we've done before. And then look over in the lower left-hand corner, 34.3 kilowatt hours per 100 miles. So that was our average efficiency over that 101.4 miles. So at call it an average temperature of 60 degrees, we did see a little bit of an improvement there in our range. All right, we are now in early June, and the current temperature outside is 79 degrees Fahrenheit. So got the car fully charged, gonna run the same route, and we're going to see what kind of efficiency numbers we end up with at I would call it a warm temperature of between 79 and 80 degrees, something like that. And I think I will run this test one more time when it's actually hot outside. Now, one thing that's a little bit different now that it's warmer out is that I think when it was cooler out, I had the climate control set to something like 68 degrees or something like that, just to keep it moderate. Well, I think 68 degrees when it's actually warm out is a little aggressive on climate control and probably not realistic. So I've got it set at 72 degrees, which I think is a more realistic temp. So we will be using air conditioning as I am right now. So that will have some kind of an impact. But overall, what kind of an impact? Let's find out. All right, so we've made it to our destination. It is actually about 85 degrees right now, and it's been above 80 pretty much the entire time, or at least for 90% of the time that I've been on the road. So this definitely qualifies as warm. I will be running this, as I said, one more time when we're into the 90s, because I'm curious if we get better or worse efficiency numbers when the climate control has to run the AC a little bit more in order to keep the cabin comfortable. But let's see what we got here at about, we'll call it 82 to 85 degrees average. All right, again, the key thing here, and by the way, I did take about a 1 mile side trip here to pick up lunch. But if you take a look down here, we are getting 30.4 kilowatt hours per 100 miles. And that is a pretty significant bump in terms of efficiency, or an improvement in efficiency over even the last moderate temperature when we were in the 60 degrees Fahrenheit range. So yeah, even at this point, I would say temperature has made enough of a difference, or can have enough of an impact, that in the coldest months, or even the moderate months, in this particular car with the range that it has on this particular route, I actually do round trip have to typically stop for 8 or 10 minutes and just add a few miles of range at a DC fast charger in order to make this trip. But on a day like today, I can make this trip in round trip without having to stop and charge. So temperature definitely has an impact. So it'll be really interesting when we test this in the when we're in the mid 90s, and we'll see if our efficiency is much changed either up or down when it's that hot out. All right, so I'll check back with you in a few weeks once we have hotter temperatures, and we'll see how that goes. All right, we are on our final temperature test run, and we're starting out at 88 degrees Fahrenheit. We're not going to get quite as hot as I had hoped today for this test, but I was hoping we would get in the mid 90s, but I don't think we're quite going to get there. So I think we're going to get into the low 90s, maybe 92 or so, and we'll see where we end up when we get to our destination. But I'm going to be locking in the same 70 miles an hour. So we'll see what difference this makes with, we'll call it roughly an 8 to 10 degree temperature differential from the last run. So I'll see you at the destination and we'll talk about the results. All right, so we're about halfway through the trip. It's reached 93 degrees Fahrenheit already, which is a little sooner than I thought we were going to get there. And the numbers are a little bit surprising, I have to admit. I'll share those with you later. But yeah, I have to say I'm a little surprised. So stay tuned. All right, we have made it. The temperature has actually, I guess it's stabilized at 93 degrees Fahrenheit. There are some thunderstorms getting ready to move into the area. I thought we were going to be a little bit above that, but it turns out not the case, at least not right now. So I think we got kind of an interesting result. Now, it's not quite as interesting as it was when we came up. I'll put that up on the screen here so you can see what I'm talking about. But at about the halfway point, we were actually showing 29.1 kilowatt hours per 100 miles. And I was pretty surprised that efficiency number was that low. But it did rise a little bit. So it turns out it wasn't quite as surprising as it looked like it was going to be. But let me show you where we're at now. All right, as you can see, we ended up at 30.2 kilowatt hours. That is actually 0.2 better than when I got when we did the last run in the 85 degree temperature range. So here we are, you can see we're at 94 degrees Fahrenheit, despite the fact that presumably being 9 degrees warmer, I would have had to run the air conditioning a little bit more. Now I did have, I had it set at the same amount, so my automatic climate control is trying to maintain that same temperature. So I'm a little surprised that we did a little bit better. So, and actually that number was 30.1 when I first arrived, and as I was hooking up the mic and all that, it jumped to 30.2. So that number is continuing to rise as we sit here consuming energy to maintain cabin climate control temperature set point without actually gaining any mileage. So I guess that's to be expected. But let's recap the numbers and kind of see what we learned from all this. All right, I've compiled the information in a spreadsheet. I'll put that up on screen so we can take a look at that together. But I'm kind of focusing on efficiency rather than absolute range, because range will obviously vary from car to car, which have different efficiency numbers. I thought it would be more appropriate to look at relative efficiency for this car and what the changes are in that relative efficiency. So we can see that I've got it broken down into both kilowatt hours per 100 miles, and it's also actually fairly common to look at this as miles per kilowatt hour. So I've kind of interpolated those so you can see both. But if we look at the differences, this is what's interesting. It really wasn't surprising, obviously, that we got less efficiency when it was much colder out. Things that were surprising to me, there were two things that jumped out. It was the degree to which that sub-freezing temperature of 10 degrees Fahrenheit actually was versus the optimal temperature of, in this case, 93 degrees Fahrenheit. There was a 24% difference in efficiency. And that's a much bigger number than I expected. Now, the other thing that jumped out at me that I thought was kind of interesting is that was actually, I was expecting 60 degrees or so to be the optimal temperature range, because once you get above that, you start using air conditioning, which I thought would be pretty much, the flip side of the energy coin to running the heating system. But as it turns out, that's actually not the case. So our optimal temperature was the hottest one that we tried, which was 93 degrees Fahrenheit. Now I imagine at some point we would reach a diminishing return. So if it was like 102 degrees, maybe the calculus starts to swing back the other way. But I think the reason for that is that in the cold weather, you're heating not only the cabin, but you're also having to keep the battery pack warm. And this is where if you have a heat pump, like I said earlier in the video, you're likely to see a less dramatic differential between the coldest temperature zones and the hottest temperature zones. So I think in my case, I saw that being a 24% difference. You might see that being somewhere between 15 and 20% difference instead if you had a heat pump in your car. Now, there are obviously a bunch of other things that can affect your efficiency, and some of them are completely out of your control, like your car's own efficiency level, the type of terrain you're riding on, how hilly it is, whether it's gravel or sand or snow or just plain asphalt, and then things like how old is your battery. So your battery is going to go through a natural degradation cycle of around 2% per year on average. It might be a little bit less than that, but that's the estimates that we're seeing for the most part. Now, what is definitely in your control are things like how fast you are driving. So the faster you're driving, the lower your efficiency is going to be. Are your tires properly inflated? How effective are you using your regen braking? Are you doing a lot of hard accelerations and rapid stops rather than relying on your regen braking? And then things like your overall cargo weight in your car. So if you're towing something or you're hauling a lot, you're hauling bags of rocks from Home Depot, or you're hauling a lot of people, those things will all have some kind of impact, a negative impact on your range. So I think another video that I want to do is I want to test what modest differences in average speed on the same route with the same basic weather, temperature and all that, what differences those might have on your range or energy efficiency. So if that's something that interests you, let me know in the comment section below, and I will start working on that video pretty soon. So I've got some other cool videos that I think are going to be interesting. I'm going to do a 1,000-mile road trip on this relatively short range EV and find out how easy or annoying that actually ends up being. And I do have a couple other EV topics that are in the pipeline that I hope you'll find interesting. So hopefully you found some of this informative or interesting, and if you did, please consider giving me a thumbs up on it. I'd very much appreciate that. Thanks for spending some of your valuable time with me today, and hope you'll join me for the next one. Until then, have fun out there.